Hi everybody, salut à tous, c'est Daniel. Today I'm gonna present to you this tree bark, this stylized tree bark. It was part of my portfolio here. This is a marmoset toolbag render. So we have three types of elements: the outer bark, the sub bark or inner bark, and branches that are cut and that protrude from the bark, from the tree. We have also details like small impacts, small curvy cuts. All right, this is the graph. We are not gonna cover the base color because we don't have enough time for this, but at least we'll manage to go through the bark graph here. And this is the height map. As I just said, we have three types of elements: the bark, some details, impacts, the sub-bark, which shows here, some curvy cracks, curvy cuts. And then it's just a matter of creating the branches, the cut branches here, with the radial pattern, the circles that we can see here, and small cracks. Here I have the noises. Let me just frame them. If I see something that can be optimized, I will try to do it and explain why I do that. So first, to make our bark, here it's generated with a tile sampler. We have to make what the tile sampler calls an input pattern. So I just did something like that. We have gradients. So how did I do that? Well, first of all, I started with a shape, a simple shape. It's a pyramid, for which I just decreased the X size. The pyramid is interesting because it gives us 4 gradients and clear, sharp lines. So I thought that was a good start. Just needed to modify it, modify the edges, the borders, most of all. For that end, a directional warp was a good choice. You can see here the warp angle. Let's see, maybe 100 degrees is the same now. As you can see, as I modify the shape, it really has an impact on the final result. I think the original angle was, well, it's just use Ctrl-Z a few times. As you can see, this is really crucial. Okay. That's it. That's the that's the angle. And as you can see, it's really important to find exactly the right setting. If you change this warp angle, you can have very different result. And I guess if we change the intensity, it's the same. The changes will be dramatic. Yes. So the intensity is 40. And I'll try to find this angle. Okay, let's move on. Then another directional warp. I'm not sure this is required. This is important. Let's see. What if I don't use it? Well, there's not much of a change, so let's scrap it. By the way, the noise used with the directional warp is a Gaussian noise. This is the scale. I think this is also very important if you want to reproduce this kind of effect. A Gaussian noise with a scale of 7. Okay, then I use the slope blur, but the effect seems quite subtle. I think we don't risk anything by just not using it. Yeah. Making this video is a good way also to optimize the graph, because it's not a cheap node, 21 milliseconds. It's not nothing, right? So, by the way, Consequently, this perlin noise is not used, so I can delete it. Well, then I use the technique of the float fill combined with float fill to gradient, 4 of them. The technique that I first saw on the algorithmic channel. It's a good source of information. It doesn't have any settings, so there's nothing to do with it. You just plug it to your pattern and use different float fill to gradients that you're gonna combine to sculpt your shape. So I just changed mainly the angle variation for every float fill to gradient. I'm gonna show you the settings. The first one, the second one, the third one, and the fourth one. All right. And then I combined them with a min darkened. So here, with this third blend node, the 4 are combined. But I thought it wasn't enough, so I just produced 2 more blends because I wanted to cut some parts, cut some corners. So I just used transformation 2D and a subtract blend here. So as you can see, I'm just cutting this right up corner, and the same thing here with a new subtract. I just cut the left part here at the bottom. All right, so nothing too complicated, I think. And then it's time to really produce the bark. This is where I use the tile sampling. No other inputs than the pattern. As you can see, I have a pattern input 1, pattern input 2. And I have nothing in the pattern input 1. What this does is that it leaves blank spaces. If I just say to it that I have only one pattern input, it of course there's nothing in pattern input 1. As you can see, it just covers the entire tree trunk with bark, which is a kind of a good thing too. I could work with this. But telling it that I have two inputs, and using only one gives me blank spaces. So I can see the sub-bark in the black parts here. So I'm just gonna show you the settings that I used. Some rotation and symmetry random, some size random, a high scale. Let's just use 9 if we want a round number. Shouldn't change anything. All right. No scale random. A small position random. No rotation random. And probably, yeah, some color random. This is the result without color random. As our inputs, our pattern is already showing different gradients. Of course, the color random slider is not that important, but I'll still try to use it to give more relief to my surface. All right, so we have this this height, this map, but of course everything is very straight and sharp. We want some curviness and some edge breaking. So that's what I'm doing here with this vector warp grayscale, slow intensity of 0.04. This requires a vector map input, which is a color input. I usually use a normal fed by a noise. And in this case, the noise is crystal 2. This is the settings, which goes through a blur. Well, I don't know about you, but I usually don't see much of a difference if I set the quality to 0 or to 1. But the difference in the processing time is huge. So for our purpose, which is making something stylized, I think I can just keep the quality level at 0. Okay, so we send this to our normal and then to our vector warp grayscale. So this is the result, starting to give life to our bark. Then I wanted to produce some undulation, some waviness. Once again, I used the vector warp grayscale, not with a normal, though this time, just with a gradient map. And this is the noise that I use, a Gaussian noise. That offers, a good waviness pattern. Just have to find the right scale. And you don't need a high intensity, 0.02 is enough in this case. Then I wanted to give this some impacts, some holes, as we can see here, some damage. All right, so to do this, I used once again a tile sampler, but I think it's too expensive. So I'm going to try with you to find another technique without, of course, using a tile sampler. So we have to produce something like this. Why not, I don't know, why not making something like using a transform 2D? Because all we want to do is just scale down this. Let's squash it a little. Okay, let's see what we have, what that does produce. Okay, auto levels, distance node, and auto levels once again, slope blur. As you can see, the impact, the result is less or more the same. So I think I just not use this tile sampler. So you can start from the original tile sampler, use transform grayscale, and try to increase the white levels as much as possible. This slope blur is fed by by this. Okay, it's the same thing. It's almost the same thing as what we used for breaking the edges. So we start from this blur HQ, and we just combine it with a multiply blend, 0.5 opacity, and with another noise, which is a clouds 2. Scale 1, no disorder. This is the slope input for this slope blur. Then this blur HQ doesn't seem to do anything, so I just scrape it also. So we have more impact, more holes, I think. So maybe if I just increase the distance, I'll kill some of them. Well, not really. Well, instead of using an auto levels here, I can just use the levels. Maybe I will get more control. I just want just want less of the impacts. Okay, yes, I think I can do something about it. Maybe an histogram scan will be better. All right, let's see. No, it's too damn powerful, so let's use the levels technique. Still nothing. Okay, that's all right. We just saved the use of a tile sampler with pretty similar result. Not exactly the same result, but it's going to be enough, I think. That's all right. Let's move on. And I just used the min darken for the impacts. Okay, then it's time for the sub-bark. Same technique, I just use a transform, divide the size by 2, turn down the white level, and just combine it with the bark with a max lighten. That way the sub-bark only shows on the darkest spots. And here to enhance the levels, the height, I just use the auto levels. Okay, I think that's it for the bark. Now we are gonna cover another effect, the soft curvy cracks, and then it would be time to talk about the cut branches. All right, so the soft curvy cracks is just a blend with a mask and a subtract, small intensity subtract, small opacity subtract. Okay, the mask is just our top bark coming through these auto levels and going through a levels node. Let me show you the settings. Just to isolate some islands that will constitute the mask. Only where we have white parts, the curvy lines that we have here will be subtracted from the bark. So now, how did I make those curvy shapes? So I started with noise. It's a crystal 2 with a scale of 8. That's a good start with the levels, of course, where I push the whites up and the blacks and grays down. The settings here. Then I want to curve them a little. So I use a directional warp. No warp angle. And a small intensity of 4.4 with this input. I think it's a Gaussian noise. Let's see. No, it's a Perlin noise. All right. Then a transform to stretch them vertically. Another directional warp with, I think, the same Perlin noise. Yes. I could use them like that, but I just use a blur pass. The difference is not major. Let's zoom in. And then the subtract. So we have our soft curvy cracks. So we covered a lot. We still have to cover the techniques involved to produce those cut branches and their integration with the bark. So let's start at the top. First, I used a technique to make a ring. There are two techniques to make rings, maybe more, I don't know, but you can start with a shape, a simple disc, and use an edge detect and play with the edge width setting. This is an interesting technique because it only requires 2 nodes, but you can also play with a blend node. And in this case, you need 3 nodes, but the processing time is much faster. As you can see, the edge detect takes almost 15 milliseconds to process, whereas with a simple subtract, it's less than 1 milliseconds. So the processing time is better in this case. So you just take a smaller shape, smaller disk, and subtract it from the base one. It's a cool technique. So I think I'm gonna use this technique instead of the edge detect one. But I have to increase the diameter of this disk to equal what we had with the edge detect. All right. So then, quick directional warp with an intensity of 8.46 with this noise. I think it's still our Perlin noise. Yes, still it's 32 scale. Just a quick blur. Once again, I will decrease the quality, set it to 0 because it doesn't matter. The levels. I think I just decreased the level out high. That's right. Then I wanted to put in the inner part of the cut branch. So it's just a disk with a lower value, and you just use your max Layton. Then I wanted to carve it a little. We just use a subtract with a paraboloid this time. And then another subtract to place cuts into the branch. How did I do the cuts? Simply with a splatter circular and a blade. The blade is made out of a waveform. The samples, here I'm just observing that the samples are high, but we use a blur. So I don't think the samples count should be high and should matter at all. I think if I just use 20 samples, it's going to be the same. Let's try 600. Yeah, that doesn't produce much of a difference. It just shifts it slightly to the right. So just gonna use 20 samples. But as you can see in the processing time, we don't see any difference. A small one here, but at 10 samples, we're starting to see some waviness. Maybe it's not a bad thing. Use it like that. Here was just a transform 2D to squash down the shape. So our blur, our splatter circular. You can take a look at the settings if you want. Okay, just hit pause if you need to. Just gonna move on. Here's just a subtract, nothing difficult. And here a slope blur, which is important to texture our ring, our branch. I just thought I would use something, a circular pattern, circular texture. Just started with a directional noise 2. Use the same technique that we saw in the cracks series, the Cartesian to polar grayscale, small blur. I like to use blur when I do stylized works because that's often a characteristic of the stylized artwork. We have a very soft shape, nothing too crispy. So yes, that's my advice. You can use some blur. So this is the slow blur grayscale with a high intensity. Once again, I blurred it a little, not using any quality. And I used these concentric circles to give our shape more texture, some sculpt with a multiply blend node. Now we have our cut branch. We just want to populate our square with 3 shapes. I just use a simple technique with transform 2D. One of them I won't change the basic shape, but for the 2 others, just want to deform it a little. To do that, I used a vector warp grayscale with a small intensity, a Perlin noise with a very low scale, the gradient map because we need a color input, and just use free transformation 2D and blended the shape together. So this one goes directly to the color pass. This part seems a bit complex, but really it's not. We just have our 3 cut branches that will be blended with high blend, blended with the bark and the inner bark. So nothing too complicated. And to produce the holes with a bulgy outer part, outer ring here, as we can see. This is what gives us this effect, this cool effect, I think. I need to do all of this. So first, a blur. Okay, nothing too complex. Then I subtract from the blur the branches. Just bear with me, it's gonna be alright. I found this just by experimenting, without thinking too much, just with intuition, which is something we do generally. So here what I want to produce is just the outer ring, which gonna serves as a bulge. So I'm just subtracting from this main part. Here I use a multiply with the main bark. Here's just an histogram scan to increase the white levels. And this is gonna be our bulge mask, as I called it. So here it's just the bark. Here our bulge mask. And here for the foreground, what we want to bulge really. This can be done by using a hat sub blending mode. So I know this is kind of a tricky part, it's not really easy to explain, but that does the trick, that produces our effect. Really gives the impression that the cut branches protrude from the bark, from the tree, with a curvy effect here on the borders. Then it's time to give space. Doesn't work anymore. All right, you know what? It's not that important. Everything worked fine for the video, just this height blend. But you have the settings. Let's see rapidly how I made the normal. It's just a 10, intensity of 10. Then I use the curvature smooth. That works well in this case to produce the roughness. I just inverted it because this part here, for example, is black. And I just want it not to be glossy, so I need to invert it. So now it's all white. And histogram range, because I don't want much of a contrast. I don't need any glossy parts. It's stylized work, so I find that stylized artwork are often matte, pretty rough. So this is our roughness map. For the ambient occlusion, I used a pretty high value. In my case, usually for realistic work, I use 0.01. Here it's a stylized piece, so I used 0.1. It's much more contrasty. The height is just our height blend. Oh, the height blend is showing now. Okay, cool. Okay, everything is showing. No? Everything is starting to show. Yeah. You know, sometimes you just have to double click on the outputs, and it helps generating the display on all the nodes. Yeah, in this case, it works. Okay, cool. And then the base color, which I can't cover because I took too much time just presenting you this graph, which is a big graph for a stylized project, I think. Just gonna use tessellation again. And of course, once you've done the base color, a big part of the project is also to produce a good render. And it's something that can take time too. And I did that with Marmoset Toolbag, which is easy to use and fast. Of course, you could produce something similar with Unreal Engine or any other engine. Okay, that's it for our stylized bark. I hope you found interesting techniques. I tried to optimize the graph whenever I had the possibility to do it. I like this project because we really used a whole bunch of techniques. The float fill, a tile sampler, some vector warp, vector morph, an edge detect that I just erased, some Cartesian to polar, the hat sub to produce this bulgy effect. So you have everything you need to also maybe produce another tree bark, another stylized tree bark, or any other stylized work. And next week it will be all about Christmas. I'm producing currently a small Christmas scene. More precisely, it's a Christmas balls generator. Once again, produced with Substance Designer. We also used Maya, Blender, Marmoset Toolbag, ZBrush, and probably Substance Painter too, to produce all that we need. But won't say no more. See you next week. Bye bye.